You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
If you have a bad back or bad knees, but feel like you should be playing alongside professional athletes goosed up on steroids, well, you're in luck because we're talking about the movie Basketball for our summer drive-in series. And if you didn't know that that voice, that woo, was Josh, and I am Nick, two of your probably most good-looking hosts of Systematic Ecology. And we're wrapping up the end of the drive-in series, which if you didn't know, the drive-in series is just a series where we, the hosts at Systematic Ecology, partnered up, and we had to pick a summer blockbuster film to watch together. We each had our own, and it couldn't be part of a franchise. And then we come together and talk about it, and you get to experience a little ear candy about these movies.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, it's such a good point, dude. If those dudes, if you could tell, they're references to Basketball, a movie that you should watch if you like rated R raunchy comedies. Yeah. So Josh, you had not seen this movie before, and for those of you who don't know, Basketball is a movie starring the creators of South Park, Matt Stone and Trey Parker. They had just got South Park approved, so they've only had like one season of South Park. And the summer after, they got they got asked to be a part of this movie. And it's just this slapstick comedy that I'll get into a little bit more. But what did you think, Josh?
Dude. Oh man, I laughed a lot. I was cracking up. I was a little bit surprised just because slapstick humor stuff doesn't typically tend to be my gig.
Yeah.
But I was suspicious I'd like it once you were like, it's the South Park guys. Because I do like some of their like more thought out jokes. You know, I don't like the fart jokes in South Park, you know, like not necessarily literally fart jokes, but like just classifying that type of humor. I don't like that as much. But a lot of times you'll see where they'll do like almost meta humor or humor that's really analyzing our culture of the time. And that's always just like, ironically, I know it sounds like I put a lot of thought into it, but really I just find it funnier.
No, 100%.
Yeah. And puns. I always think the puns are really funny. Or like stuff where people are doing something and they're criticizing someone else for doing literally the same thing. Yeah. And they just have no idea. That's the kind of stuff where I'm like, that's good humor. So yeah, this had a little bit of the raunchy you mentioned, a little bit of that, like, I don't know, maybe you call it like the fart joke kind of humor, but it also had a lot of that like really analytical kind of humor, I guess.
Yeah, I think because you were talking about the first year of South Park where they're the first year into their careers, right? They are guys, they're literally like a couple years out of college. And they went from making a first season TV show on Comedy Central, which was like still kind of a newer network at the time. And then they get asked to do a feature film, which is kind of nuts to think about. But Basketball, I'll talk to you. So the the plot summary is basically that Trey Parker, the main character, who's known as Coop, and his best friend Reamer, they live together. They go to a house party. Have an old high school friend. They're right around probably early 20s kind of age where everyone's kind of going to college, and they are still stuck in their hometown, hanging out, playing Nintendo. And they end up inventing a basketball game called the Basketball, where they basically blend elements of baseball, but then add a basketball hoop. And they have, so the whole movie is basically like modern sports suck, and they make this like fantasy world where like sports are so commercialized that nobody is attending sports events anymore. And so now they have created this game that any Joe Schmo can play, and there's not allowed to be any corporate sponsorships or basically commercialization besides what is there for the game. And it's basically their journey on getting basketball, this silly invented game, into a professional sport, and then fighting corporate leaders to keep the sport quote unquote pure. Yeah.
It was so funny how it started too, because they're at this like party from the old high school hottie or whatever.
Yeah.
And, these two guys challenge him, and they're good at making shots. They're just making the shots. And he's basically trying to describe how they're going to play. He's like, we're not going to really play a game. Because they already bet money. They were like, we'll bet you $20 to win. And then these guys come out and they're balling. And it's like, oh, crap. How do we beat these guys? Because they're actually good. And they kind of just make up. They like just BSing. Make up this thing on the spot. It's like, you just described horse. I was like, no, it's not horse. It's like baseball. Because if I shoot it here, I get a home run. And if I shoot it there, I get a first base. And it was literally just nonsense that ended up becoming like a real thing.
Yeah. They go to this party and it's literally a bunch of yuppies. If you can think of like the late 80s, like 90s yuppies, like that's exactly. And they challenge these yuppies to basketball. And like Josh said, they're like, oh, this is easy. Like we play basketball all the time. And they are just alley-ooping, slam dunking these dudes in their khakis, their boat shoes, and their cardigans tied around their neck.
That was pretty funny too, honestly. I was like, why are they balling right now?
Yeah, probably one of the best jokes starting off. Did you just describe horse? No. Yeah, so good. It's part of it too. Oh, so we'll get more into the jokes and the meat of the movie, but like this movie was written by the guy who did the Naked Gun movies and who did Airplane, which are like legendary slapstick, movies. Airplane started it. And then the first Naked Gun, the other two Naked Guns, I enjoyed them, but they definitely didn't receive the amount of attention as the first one did. And so he wanted to make this movie, and he actually, the director, creator, David Zucker, actually invented basketball for real. So like him and his friends made this game like back in the day, and like actually a local news station actually came and filmed his friends in their neighborhood doing it, and he was like, I'm going to make a movie about this.
That's funny.
And what happens if it went pro? Yeah. So which is kind of nuts. And but we did blockbusters and summer blockbusters. So originally he wanted Chris Farley to play the lead, and Chris Farley at the height of his comedy career said no, and then he approached the South Park dudes. David Zucker did, and it was on a budget of like $25 million, and it was actually a flop. It only did $7 million during its time in the theaters, so it was a pretty big flop, but has become kind of like a meme. Big South Park fans, like I'm a huge South Park guy, have the movie. Like, still enjoy it every once in a while. Yeah.
Yeah. It was pretty funny. It's pretty funny. The biggest challenge though was finding it. So if people are like looking to stream, you got to get like add-on stars with a 7-day trial and watch it like immediately, then go cancel that subscription.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, you know what I do? I cheated, I'm like, I'm not paying $10. Of course, you can always rent it on Amazon for like $4 something, I think, but
yeah, and it's a movie. I'd say, free trial it. Even still, I would probably even say you could probably go to Walmart, just do the $5 DVD bin. You could probably find it pretty easily.
Ooh, that's a good idea. Yeah,
go to like we have a big used book media store, and I actually got it from there for like $3. So,
So do that. Get one of those projectors, put it outside, put a sheet up on your driveway, and you just created your own drive-in.
Man, literally. And the nostalgia is super real. I felt some serious nostalgia watching this movie too. Oh yeah, I felt like it was funny because I was feeling the nostalgia feels, and I've never seen it before. But I was like, this is what that was what humor was in the 90s. No, it's real. I think South Park, and I think because they shaped humor so much in the late 90s, early 2000s, that I think that even because the South Park movie, I had revisited it in college and had the nostalgic feeling, but I had never seen the South Park movie until I was in college, and I think they just have that. I get that. Yeah. Same thing with like Stick of Truth. Great game. Oh, so anything South Park. The Fractured Butthole, the sequel to the Stick of Truth. I still haven't played it. I've been wanting to. Levels better than the Stick of Truth. It's so good. Yeah, I love Stick of Truth. I was just afraid nothing could live up to how much I like that. Anyway, I thought the same. Back to basketball. Back to baseball. We could talk about South Park all day, but we won't. So that's we had talked. Episode. Yeah, next episode. We should do that actually. So do you think we kind of said yes, but like, do you think that the movie with all its slapstick comedy and like fart jokes has like a good, legitimate criticism of like the sports industry?
Yeah, it's funny that this was in '90s because I feel like it's only become more relevant,
Mm-hmm.
so, in some different ways, even. But like, yeah, absolutely, a lot more commercialized, a lot more all that stuff. I'm not huge into a lot of sports. I know Nick's wearing his Miami Dolphins hat. You know, I support all Florida football
It's true.
except for Gators.
Eh.
Sorry if you're a Gators fan, but you're not really welcome here. Find a new podcast. I'm kidding. But actually, I grew up in Tallahassee. My mom went to Florida State, so I'm obligated. I have a contract at birth to hate the Florida Gators. It's also part of just being like your last name's Knoll. You can't, you know, you got to cheer for the Knowles. So I'm a big college football guy. Yeah. Huge college football guy. I told my wife when she married me, she's now officially a semi-Knoll. So for me, I'm looking at that. And for those who don't know, this year, the Supreme Court had a ruling. And basically now college players are going to be able to make money for what they do in college football. So they're going to be able to do some of these advertisements and different stuff on the side. It's exciting on one hand because it means I might get the college football video games back. And those are the only ones that I cared about. I don't care about Madden. So I'm like, oh, that's great. But on the other hand, a lot of us are afraid right now who love college football because all of a sudden it's going to become about the money now. It's going to become about these other things. The reason I like college football over pro football is because to me, it seems like they're playing harder because they know they can't get there unless they get it here, you know? And then once they're in pro, they're already making the money. Like, I can sit on the bench and make millions, you know? Like one of my favorite college football players, Christian Bonder, was only in pros for like a couple years. I'm not saying he didn't try. I am saying he made plenty of money. His wife, like, is one of the announcers for sports, and he doesn't do anything anymore. You know, like he's fine. And that's just, I guess that's like the one fear for me right now that makes it really relevant. And then couple that with like a lot of sports, and this goes with our political series we're doing right now with our show too, is, you know, all of a sudden you see all of these things, whether you agree or not, with the, you know, they have the Black Lives Matter on the back of the helmets. I fully support that, all that. But, you know, they have like a lot of political stuff on their jerseys, on their helmets, on this. And it has driven a lot of people away from watching sports because they're like, I just want the sport. I don't want all this other stuff. Yeah.
I think it's almost like basketball does like it's like a post-apocalyptic sports movie where like everything else is fine except like the state of sports.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's an actually ongoing joke throughout where, you know, they talk about Shaq and they're like, where do you think Shaq made all his money? And like, they're talking about like when he actually went pro, when he went to the Lakers, and they're like, oh yeah, when he was in college, and everyone's like, what? No.
Yeah. It's supposed to be, he didn't make it in Miami. He made it when he sold out and traded to LA, but everybody's answer actually kept being when he was in college. And now it's funny because that might be true soon. Also, if you saw Nick Saban's paychecks, good Lord.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that man was doing freaking Aflac commercials. I mean, even before that, right? Even before that.
Yeah. Which that's my commentary of the day. They talked about like early on in the movie, there's like sports used to be done for the nobility's sake. Like we like to see how good humans can be at stuff. Like it was about the thing. And that's one of my big criticisms against Nick Saban. You know, he has his team do all this like psychoanalysis stuff to like mess with the other team. We're going to go out there and stomp on their logo. We're going to be disrespectful and all this ways so that they get upset and we can beat them. Because for him, it's all about winning. It's not about the sport anymore.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people love him. I know a lot of people love Alabama football. But for me, I'm like, you're ruining the game with some of this where you're making it about things that aren't the sport itself, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. They tie it, which is really interesting because South Park lives in this weird space, the creators, where they like grew up punk kids and they're like kind of against the system, but they're also like, they tie a lot of their stuff to like American exceptionalism and like you said, they talked about like how sports was like a metaphor for like the achievement and growth that is possible and can be exceeded by humans, you know, particularly in the United States, and how, like you said, it's critiquing like the selling out part of it. So it's just really interesting because there's lots of images of like, you know, like when they do stuff like the American things, right? Like the American flag will play or they'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. And like, I thought that was just because South Park has this weird, they also did a movie called Team America, which is like all about critiquing like the Bush administration's foreign policy.
Mhm.
And so anyway, it's just interesting to watch a movie that was made 6 years earlier that's like sports America, and then later on they're like America.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting.
Yeah. Sidebar on that. Whenever they were critiquing how people were like, all up in arms about people kneeling during the anthem, they did it, or like, we'll just have J.J. Abrams do what he did with Star Trek and Star Wars, and he'll redo the anthem, and it's fine. And the anthem starts with, "Please stand, kneel, sit, or I forget, like squat during this anthem," and everybody's like, "Wait, how do we protest it now?"
Yeah, that was
like,
a South Park episode, and J.J. Abrams tries to redo the anthem, and everyone's just confused, and then it just muddles the anthem and ruins it for everybody. It's so good.
That had me cracking up. But yeah, and I mean, you see the same kind of themes with like this movie too, and I think what's funny is like it starts off with this criticism, and we're going to get away from this part. But if you remember the beginning, it's also criticizing how people are like overly celebratory and it's all about the show. And yet a lot of basketball, it's like they ignored that the rest. I don't know if this is done on purpose or not, but like a lot of basketball, when you're watching the games, there's like these women doing these shows and like all this stuff. And a lot of it is like, oh, can we distract the shooter? As like part of the game is you can do whatever you want to interfere with the shooter to make him like miss because he's distracted, right? And it is very much just show and stuff. And I was like, did they just forget that was part of the beginning, or are they just intentionally ignoring that? I was kind of confused about that.
No, I didn't even really catch that, but that's true. And even like, to a certain degree at the end, they do, like, obviously the bad guy gets them to agree to like a corporate merch deal.
Yeah, of
and
course.
It's like going to be like the guy's like, oh, we're going to send proceeds to the charity that the main character's love interest is, the director of. And so he uses that as blackmail. But even later, they start tying in corporate stuff. And even the main character finds out that all his merchandise is being made by like child laborers in Calcutta. And then he stops it and creates jobs in the United States. And so he basically becomes like an idea, instead of like this evil corporate overlord. He starts like, he gives his team members part ownership of, the team. He gets jobs in the United States and, has them do the Pledge of Allegiance before their workday or whatever, which is really funny. Yeah, obviously. And I think that it's one of South Park's things is that there's an early episode where they critique like a local coffee shop, and then they compare it to Starbucks. Like, so Starbucks coming into a town, and the local coffee shop is like, oh, this is evil. We have to get the corporate thing out of there. And so they start using like marketing tactics that are usually associated with like big corporations. And like the whole point was that like some businesses can be good for the economy and communities, and local businesses can be just as bad. And I think they kind of are getting around to the same thing, where they're like, it's mostly the content of the character behind the, the corporate owner or something.
Yeah. I like how we're making this a South Park episode too.
Yeah.
Because it also made me think of a South Park episode. There's the one where they're criticizing school meals and stuff. They have all this processed food at the school, and they're kind of criticizing that, and they end up replacing it with, they team up with Burger King. They have the Impossible Burger, so they get that kind of stuff replacing it. So, which it turns out was also just vegan processed crap. Like, there's the same thing. They just said vegan because it didn't have anything real in it, know. And you kind of see this with here too. Like I mentioned earlier, like it was all about the showmanship, and then they still made it about the showmanship, and it was all about not having capitalism. And then they end up doing capitalism, and you see with like the kids stuff where they were really upset and went and did something because they were unintentionally using these children in for child labor, but at the same time intentionally they're taking a kid to the bar, they're having him drink alcohol with them, they in the hospital, and they end up like pulling some plugs and electrocuting the child. And it's like, you might not have known about the abuse you were doing over there, but you did know what you were doing to the kid that was with you. So you kind of still see that little bit of classical irony, I guess you would say.
Yeah, and like you said, even too, the part where they have like all of the players and people in the stadium wear like a ribbon for the kid because he's dying of some liver disease of some sort. It's unclear, and it makes it funnier when they take him out drinking, and he's like the kid's drunk out of his mind, and they're like, "Are you sure you're going to be okay for your liver surgery?" And
it's like, guys, y'all are contributing. Like, yeah,
I wonder if they did
like,
that on purpose. If that's like, if it's, you know, kind of similar where they're like, oh, America and stuff. I wonder if it was intentionally like, oh yeah, there's just no way out of this. Like we're just stuck in exploiting people for, making money.
I'm going to say it has to be knowing them. I feel like it definitely, but also, I mean, I'm just thinking like, this is funny, not to make it about churches, but I mean, just Americans in general, we do this thing like we care so much about donating to help these people who are hungry in Africa or hungry over here. We send missionaries to these other countries to help with these needs. And it's like, okay, but you're mistreating the people here. Like, I'll be specific with churches because that's my own culture and it's easier to criticize. But, when you're here talking bad about one another, you have people in your own church who can't afford their house bill and can't afford 3 meals a day. And you're sending money to a missionary to feed children in another country. My mind always goes to, well, why aren't you caring for the people who are hungry in your own congregation first?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I really like that kind of the same thing translates. Yeah. I just really, that's just no,
I didn't mean to just drop that, but
no, I got to think about that more. I think that's such a really great, I think you like the way that you talked about like talking about the exploitation of child laborers versus like the acceptance of exploiting the kid with sickness as just like part of it and charming and sweet, is like, oh man, the irony there is insane. And then tying it into like the missionary culture, the toxic kind of missionary culture is is really, really good.
Well, funny thing though, this is one of the funny jokes that does tie in. Whenever he goes over country to like save those people in the other country, those kids, they've tried to solve the mystery of why he's missing, right? So the first one, it was like, maybe he hung himself because one guy was like, I don't care if he killed himself, And then the next one, it was this lady was like, he doesn't care about people who are in harm. It's like, maybe he's with children who are in the worst situation. Disney World. I was like, why? Like, why are we just like, I feel like something must have been happening in the 90s with Disney, but I was like, that was still funny. I was like, why?
Yeah, I also was like, wait a second, like what's happening with Disney that they're like, yeah, this is even worse place for children. Yeah. Also, they have Robert Stack, I think is his name, who was the host for freaking Unsolved Mysteries, and they actually brought him in.
That was so funny.
So great. I had forgotten about the whole Unsolved Mysteries bit.
And they actually got Reggie in the film.
Oh yeah.
God, that was cool. Another outdated joke though. There was another one. They were talking about how the kid, like everybody being like drunk, smelling like alcohol. Like they smell like Robert Downey Jr. Yeah. I was like, oh, that's right. He was not in a great place in the 90s.
That joke does not age well, but it's also one of the more funnier jokes, and that's one I allowed myself to laugh pretty hard at. Yeah, but for those of you out there, be warned. It's I think it's rated R. It's the South Park guys, so you guys know the caution. But also, there's some jokes that really didn't age well. There's a lot of like homophobic jokes, and lots of like racial stereotype jokes. Like when they go to India, like the kids are wearing hard hats, and the hard hats are shaped like turbans, and you're like, oh gosh.
I was trying not to laugh though. I was like, I know this is terrible, but.
Yeah, it's a late 90s. Like, it was stuff that was pretty commonplace, like the jokes. They were pretty commonplace. We did.
Although I still thought it was interesting and a little bit amusing because the one joke, I'm not going to repeat the joke. They do make a joke that was kind of homophobic. Like, oh no, that wasn't a homophobic joke. That was an Australia joke, but they got a flag, which I didn't know you could get flags in basketball because you can taunt people, but apparently you can get a flag for being homophobic. After all.
They did. Yeah, that was interesting. Where I was like, "That's the only penalty someone got was
that's the only penalty you can get." Apparently, you could literally squirt milk out of your nipple, pretend to cut your finger off, moon someone, but you can't. That's the line.
What's interesting too is South Park was one of the first shows that was like on the front lines for fighting for like gay rights and stuff. Like there were
Really?
great gay rights organizations in the United States that like were like thanked South Park, and like South Park did a lot of work with a lot of gay rights.
Awesome.
Yeah. So weird, kind of dichotomy of like making out very strong gay jokes to also being like people should marry whoever they want. Yeah. Very interesting. But so, I guess too, before we wrap it up, like obviously South Park and the South Park dudes have like shaped humor, like contributed to the popularization of adult animation, but they were actually the first, there was the first instance of the word derp actually happened at the beginning of the film. And for those of you who don't know, derp, I'm sure most people here have to know what derp is, right? Like derpiness, derpy derp derp. It's kind of an abstract term that makes
used in South Park a lot.
Yeah, it really is. And I thought that was interesting, and just just it's obviously we've talked about just how its impact has and why it's important to discuss it. But I thought that even before, like their first outside of South Park, they invented like a meme word, and I was like, how cool is that?
Oh yeah. No, I love that you included that in the notes. Whenever we first got my dog, I got a little beagle named Copper. We both, me and my wife, were on the way there. Like, beagles are really derpy dogs.
Oh yeah.
So we looked up like derpy names, and we were trying to figure out what to name them. I ended up naming him after Fox and the Hound, but I still sometimes will call him my little derpy boy. So I love that you included that.
That makes me happy, and just like the fact that like you just shared your animal, your intimate moments with your animals, because I'm imagining calling him your little derpy boy, and
my little derpy boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, whenever like runs into a wall or something just stupid, you're like, "Oh, my little derpy boy, come here."
So, we've covered a lot in this brief time with basketball. I think that y'all should. I hope that our conversation has you curious. I think if you watched it, that if y'all like South Park, you'll absolutely like basketball.
Oh yeah,
but if we were going to a basketball game, or just basketball, seeing it at the drive-in, especially in the summer, it's hot. We're probably in middle school, high school. We can't drink. What kind of icy would you get, Josh, to cool yourself down?
Man, I'm thinking we're on the way to the drive-in. We could stop at a 7-Eleven or a QT or something, to get like a real good range of flavors. They do have, and I know you said we're not 21, but good news is these ices, even when they're named after alcoholic drinks, aren't alcoholic. The pina colada flavor, man. I love it. So I love just that combination of things. It's funny because I don't really eat coconut. I don't really eat pineapple. But man, you get them together, something magical happens. Magical.
That's a great choice. I worked at a coffee shop, and we had a pina colada smoothie, and it was amazing.
Sounds great.
Spectacular.
Yeah.
It's a great choice.
I would good pina colada, man.
So good. I would really like the lemonades when they mix it with stuff. I would probably pick like a raspberry lemonade icy.
Ooh.
They always hit the spot. One. Yeah. And I'd hit 7-Eleven, because every time I go anywhere that's not 7-Eleven, the ices, the consistency just isn't there for me. 7-Eleven just has it.
That's fair.
So
that's fair.
Yeah.
Really, I prefer a slush to an icy, but that's getting into minute differences that don't really matter.
Oh yeah.
I just like them a little bit more liquid. I drink it too fast for an icy. I end up with just a bunch of ice.
Yeah, that's how I am too. Which I think 7-Elevens are slushies, right? And then ices are.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I'm counting them all as the same for the purpose of it being able to say pina colada. So
I like it. So there you go, listeners. If you go to the drive-in this summer, which my wife and I are planning to see a double feature of Oppenheimer and Barbie at some point, that's what I'm going to get.
Very nice.
I'm going to get myself that icy. But yeah, this is the last drive-in episode for the series, and you can check out the show notes, and you can go to the playlist and listen to all of them. We've done really cool stuff. Josh and I did one on Kingdom of Heaven. Christian and Kino did Blade, even though they cheated with their franchise. Those cheaters.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, a very great episode.
And The Last Dragon. That was a good
one.
one.
Yeah, The Last Dragon.
Inside Out was one.
That's true.
Good stuff.
Yeah, really good movies, really fun series. So yeah, you should do that. And there's a whole bunch of stuff. You should rate and review the show on Podchaser or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you get the podcasts. There's a YouTube channel. We have a Discord that you can come nerd out with us. Remember, we're a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
This was an Anazao Ministries podcast. If you enjoyed this show and would like to learn more about our network, be sure to check out the Anazao Ministries Podcast Network.